So common invisible effects. One of the most common one is called wire removal. And what this is in an action movie, there can literally be hundreds of wire removal shots. A production technique called a wire gag is used where the talent is rigged up, the talent meaning the actors, is rigged up with wires to either assist him or her to leap over a tall building with a single bound, or as a safety feature to save the actor or the stuntman from certain death. Quick example right here. Less graceful but equally important use of wires is for explosions. An explosion that would really blow the extras like 50 feet in the air is going to hurt. So wire harnesses are added to the on-screen talent, and they are yanked 50 feet instead, and hopefully in a very safe way. As you can see, a wire removal has to do with cloning out and bringing back the original plate. And the reason they're using green here isn't really so much to key something out. It's really just to make sure that you can actually see where the wire is and it doesn't get lost. If the wire was white or black, then oftentimes you may not be able to see it clearly enough in order to erase it. Like while this lad in the picture here is contemplating suicide from the 6th floor in the story here, the movie producers don't want him to actually die during production. So safety wire harnesses are used, which then had to be removed. Whenever you're trying to, remove an item from a shot, the background frame must be created for the area covered by the offending item. And the background frame with the item removed after you paint it all out is called a clean plate. Making the clean plate requires movement between the target item and the background, so you can create and select clean regions from different frames where the item is absent, and then assemble them into a clean plate. And since this shot had a camera push-in, it was easy to select earlier and later frames to resize and paste together to make the clean plate. If the camera doesn't move, it's easier work. If the camera is moving, then you have to select things and then paste the animation footage on top of the part you're trying to erase. A close cousin of wire removal is rig removal. A rig is any kind of device used on the set to hold up an item or some kind of object for filming. And after the rig has done its job, it must be removed from the scene. Here's a shot from Deadwood. Now, I just kind of put that in there just as an example of such, but Deadwood was filmed on the set of the famous Santa Clara Melody Ranch, Gene Autry, singing cowboy movies, that kind of thing, which is also where Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained was filmed. But if the rig is too big to paint out, you're going to have to call in a digital matte painter. And of course, many compositors are also pretty good matte painters, especially for, a fairly modest challenge that this shot here would represent. Looking around the scene, there's plenty of elements that you could clone into the offending regions. And when I say clone, you're basically picking up other pieces of the plate and putting it on the part that you're trying to cover up to kind of build the clean plate there. And then you could use like a soft edge matte of the painted region to composite over the shot, so only the painted region is basically replaced. Then of course you got to make sure that the atmosphere in the grain or the digital noise matches as well, and bada bing, you've created a clean plate and you've done some removal. Here is the actual set right here, and goes a long way in, especially if you're working and you're shooting on location and there's things that shouldn't be there. Even in period pieces, you might even have to replace things like outlets and light switches and all kinds of things that kind of give away modern life. Monitor replacement is a pretty big task, a pretty common task. While not impossible, it's pretty difficult to actually shoot monitors and TV sets with images displayed on them. And the reason why is reflections and timing of the footage. If the timing has to be just right, it's pretty tricky to kind of get that on set. It's easier just to kind of replace the monitor and then time that perfectly to what the actors are supposedly looking at. So oftentimes you would just shoot with either a blank monitor and then later composite that into the video footage as another invisible effect. Here's some typical modern Here's a typical monitor replacement, large kind of control rooms. You could use green screen, but green kind of spills all over the place. When I'm doing monitor replacement of TVs or phones, I usually like the device to be off, and instead of being replaced with some kind of bright green screen, because green is going to spill all over like a user's hands or the face. If it's off and you still can get a pretty good border around that object, like a white phone with a black screen is pretty ideal, or something like that. If it's off, you can also get the reflections and pull the reflections pretty easily to put back on the screen after the new artwork is placed there. And that goes a long way to kind of fully integrate the shot. This is what I'm talking about here with a TV screen. As you can see, you get the reflections in there. And, the tracking markers here aren't really necessary. You don't need that because the whole green over black is basically one big tracking marker, and you could just do a planar track on that. You don't really need all these things. And these things are really just going to get in the way of the reflections anyway. But here's the shot, and, with the reflections added in more subtly, there's the shot. And the reflections have to be subtle, but it's a nice thing to integrate in there. Reflection removal, also pretty common. It occasionally happens that a reflection or a shadow of the camera, crew, or microphone boom will show up in a shot. I put this in there. You're not going to find behind the scenes of these mistakes. It's erased pretty quickly, but if you're shooting this and the camera is in the reflection, you obviously got to replace that. But this is more often than not pretty common. Reflection removal examples, getting rid of stuff like this. Even things that aren't crew or camera related, maybe it's just distracting. Shot from a Jim Carrey movie. And if it's just too distracting, you might just want to creatively take things away as well. And you could see that's just kind of reflections taking away.